All right, so for our second break of the day, the Quick Center for the Arts and Sozo Artists, they bring us Adreinne Waheed, a visual artist whose work bears witness to and holds space for the beauty, brilliance, and resilience of the African diaspora. During her 20-year career, Waheed has researched, produced, and directed illustrious images for publications including Vibe, King, and Essence magazines. And her mesmerizing photography has been published by the New York Times, National Geographic, Photo District News, and The Fader. Take a look.
Hi, my name is Adreinne Waheed, and I am a visual artist specializing in photography. My work revolves around uplifting and elevating Black voices and Black images. I started shooting when I was 13 years old. That's when my father gave me a camera, gave me my first camera, and I never really put it down. I've worked in every aspect of photography, which actually led me to a 20-year career in photo editing. I worked off and on at Essence Magazine for over 20 years, Vibe Magazine also. And it's just a lifelong love. Photography has been a lifelong love and passion of mine that has driven me most of my life. And I feel very blessed to still be able to work in this field that I love. In 2018, I self-published a book of my photography called Black Joy and Resistance. Here it is right here. Black Joy and Resistance is mainly a photo coffee table book, but it also has some poetry, writing, and prose from some of my favorite writers and poets. The idea around it is to highlight the joy in Black folks across the diaspora. I traveled from Brooklyn, where I live, to Salvador Bahia, to South Africa, and beyond, Washington, D.C., photographing not only um, events and festivals where Black folks were celebrating themselves, but also places where we were fighting for our rights, protesting and basically just standing up for what we believe in and fighting against any sort of oppression, and fighting against any systems that would sort of hold us back. And so the book that I put out in 2018, Black Joy and Resistance, at that time, I had no idea that we would be in the sort of turmoil, that racial turmoil that the country is in right now. And so, little did I know that sort of theme would resonate so much now in 2020. And so, the idea is kind of like Black Joy is resistance, because if you are fighting against an oppressive system that wants to sort of keep you in your place, so to speak, and tell you that your natural way of being is wrong. The natural way you look, the way you wear your hair, the music you listen to, your natural self-expression is wrong. Then you just striving for happiness, to be an individual, to be yourself, to express those God-given rights that we're supposed to have, that becomes a resistance. And so that's sort of the idea around my book and around this particular body of work. And that idea brought me to where I am now, being, in the middle of this pandemic, being in New York City, feeling, just watching the news cycle and from George Floyd to Breonna Taylor, to so many things that are going on in the news right now. And sometimes you feel overwhelmed by it. Sometimes you feel helpless, like maybe, your voice doesn't matter. But, that's when I'm feeling those things, that's what drove me out to the streets to to document the Black Lives Matter protests, and when I've been to over 50 protests from June till now, and mostly in New York, but also in Washington D.C. and also in Atlanta. And for me, it has been so soothing to be out there because you are raising your voice, exercising your rights, coming together with a group of like-minded people to say, hey, this is not okay. We are the people and we want justice. And so just to be out there was very cathartic, but I consider myself I would say a visual activist in the sense that I'm not only documenting the movement, but also participating in it. And when you feel like you're not being heard, there's nothing like getting out there in the streets and raising your voice and feeling that camaraderie with a group of like-minded people. And so it's been really important for me to be out there, and I've taken a lot of amazing images that I hope to continue to share, and perhaps it'll be Black Joy and Resistance Part 2. What I want to say about the current movement, the Black Lives Matter movement that I've been documenting, what stands out to me, there are several moments, but what stands out to me most is the fact that this movement is being led by some amazing young people. And, these folks are sometimes between 17 years old and 23 years old. And it's just so refreshing and so inspiring to see these young folks out there leading a movement. And so I've come to know some of these young activists, and I'm inspired and I admire them so much, even though a lot of them are half my age. And so when I replay this summer in my mind, there's so many of these moments, these iconic moments where you have these young people, leading the charge and making their voice heard and actually moving a whole body of people towards change. And, that in general is what the sort of feeling of the movement has been. And, it's very important to me as an artist of color, as a Black woman and a photographer, to control the narrative, because if you listen to TV, you listen to the president, you might hear that the protesters are a bunch of thugs burning down the cities. But I've been to over 50 protests and not one of them were violent. And so when you have that sort of clash in messaging, it lets me know that it's even more important for the people's voices that are down there on the ground to make it to the mainstream, and for their voices to be a part of the bigger conversation, as opposed to just putting people in boxes and allowing their sort of stereotypical ideas of who a people might be or what a movement might be. Instead of allowing that to fester, let's really get at what's really going on the ground. And that's where someone like me is very important, I feel, in documenting this movement. When I think about just overall, while I was shooting my book in 2018, an image that stands out, my book cover, and again, give a little flash. Available on my website, by the way, blackjoyandresistance.com. This image, the book cover image, is from Afropunk, and it's, I believe, 2015. Afropunk, a group of young kids, their favorite artist is on stage, and they're just jumping around, having a great time, not caring who's around or what's going on, just really living in that moment. And I love the book. I love the image. It speaks to me to that Black joy as well as the resistance, because even though like they're celebrating, but they could also be protesting, and in their uniqueness, whether it was the guys wearing nail polish and makeup, or the tattoos and the piercings, and the hip hop slash metal slash rock, just like a real mashup of a bunch of different things. In that in and of itself is sort of the determination to be exactly who you are outside of any sort of boxes, the determination to not conform, and just to be an individual. And that in some ways I feel like is resistance.